Okay, that was it for now.
That was it? Okay, the last part. From what we have said before, it may be clear that we are part of the cosmos. Yeah, we are part of that universal web of destiny. But also that we are constantly, based on our past and on our free will, although it sometimes is limited, that free will, but based on our free will, we are weaving our future destiny. How can we give direction to this? Sometimes we feel like a plaything on the wild waves of the ocean of emotion and thoughts. But we ourselves, we want to hold the helm of the ship of consciousness that we are. How do we do that? Well, the first step, I think, is to find out who we really are. That we are not our body is obvious, but are we our personality? When people introduce themselves, they call themselves by their names. My name is John, my name is Mary. But who is this my whose name is John or Mary? And sometimes you can have the awareness of looking down on yourself, then you experience as if you are two eyes within yourself, two egos within yourself. One ego looks down on the other, and you can experience those two eyes at the same time, and that means that there must be a third self which experiences these two egos simultaneously. Think about that. And the idea that a human being is really a stream of consciousness is perceived as quite plausible. And man is precisely that I with whom he identifies. Roughly you can say that in the stream of consciousness there is an ego that is more focused on the outside of things, the personal ego, the personality, living in the sense of separateness. And there is what we may call the inner man, who realizes that he is in contact with others. Yes, that there is a connection, that he is connected to others by inseparable bonds. Well, do we identify with that outer man or the more inner man? That's a matter of choice. As the law of karma shows us, who we are, we determine for ourselves. It is our choice. Karma therefore teaches that we make our own character. It is the result of the way we think. We use to explain that a very old axiom that is as follows. You sow a thought and reap an action. You sow an action and reap a habit, and you sow a habit and reap a character. And thanks to the portion of free will we have, we can choose what thoughts we think, and are they thoughts of pride, of selfishness, of greed, of arrogance, self-conceit? In short, all the thoughts that come from our personal consciousness, the consciousness that focuses on the outside of things and lives in the delusion of separateness? Or do we choose thoughts that emanate from cooperation, solidarity, brotherhood, thoughts of unity, love, compassion? These kinds of thoughts naturally lead to very different actions and to a different pattern of habit. And that also leads to a different karma. Because you can extend this axiom by saying you saw a character and reap a destination, or you reap your karma, or you reap your new reincarnation. So by thinking, you weave your own web of destiny, your own destiny. And this idea becomes even clearer when you realize that thoughts are living beings. They are very primitive, elemental beings, which we can either nurture or ignore. And if we nurture them, then we focus our consciousness on them, and they grow and become more powerful. And if we ignore them, then they will slowly die in our consciousness. And note, ignoring them is not fighting them, because if we fight them, we nurture them. True, we are doing so in a negative way, but hate or resentment or antipathy is also a binding force. If attention is food for thought, then negative attention is just as much food. We all know this. Everyone likes to think about the object of their love, but what we often don't realize is that we also like to think about the object of our hate. We crave revenge. We hope the other person will fare badly. And what is even less known is that fear is also a kind of hatred, a more passive form. And the image of fear fills us with disgust, and the more fear we feel, the stronger we make those fearful thoughts, and all these thoughts ultimately shape our character and thus our destiny. In the first talk of next year, 7th January, we will reflect on this at length. So, if you have to come to the conclusion for yourself, nobody forced you, but for yourself you came to the conclusion that you want to make the personal elements in your consciousness, in your mind, less important, then you have to focus on the impersonal aspect, or the superpersonal aspects as we call them. So then you focus on the inner human, and the result will be different actions, a different character, and different consequences that you will reap. Your life changes. But there's another very important thought that you have to include in this. We said before that our personal karma, our individual web of destiny, is part of the greater web, as is the case with all our fellow human beings, of course. So the change of your individual karma, because we start thinking differently, has its impact on the whole. It must be so, because we are connected with countless inseparable bonds. And if you make one thread of a spider's web move, it has its repercussions on the whole web. Let's concretize that idea. Every thought you think makes an impression in your own consciousness. As a result, there is a tendency to repeat that thought and the actions that result from it. You will obviously repeat. Your entire habit pattern is permeated by those thoughts. But each thought also makes an impression in the minds of people with whom you interact. With the people closest to you, the impression will be the greatest, but even people further away from you will get an impression of your thoughts. Even if you are walking down the street and run into somebody, the other will have an impression of you. If you are thinking lovely and beautiful thoughts at that moment, the brief impression the other person will get of you will be different, probably, than if you are walking with a crutch, or when you are resentful or negative in any way. And of course that impression will not be very deep, and the person you pass will soon forget it. Nevertheless, that impression is there. You have forged a bond with that passerby, and sooner or later you will run into him or her again. Thus, you see that by your thinking, you not only shape your own character, you also create your environment. You shape the circumstances in which you live. You choose the people with whom you will interact, and all on the basis of love or hate. So, the feeling that many of us have that they cannot define their own destiny is not justified on the basis of karma. We can understand that feeling, we can, because it's very logical that if you don't have any idea of karma, you think that it's all by coincidence, but that is all because of ignorance. As mentioned, we tend to repeat the thought we think. And since thoughts are living beings, they too are subject to the law of cyclicity. So if you have once thought them, they are bound to come back. And if we keep feeding them, keep focusing our attention on them, they will take more and more possession of us. If we don't dwell on this process any longer, if we don't think about the nature of thoughts, about the process of thinking, then we don't realize that we are, in fact, eliminating our free will and unwillingly hosting a certain type of thought over and over again. And because thoughts are at the root of our actions, we will repeat certain actions again and again. We thereby predestine ourselves to repeat certain actions, to make certain mistakes again and again, to come into contact again and again with people who have a bad influence on us and all that kind of things. So it's not a force outside us that predestine us to a certain fate. It is the force within us. It is our own thinking. The conclusion is obvious. If we want to give direction to our destiny, if we want to determine what kind of karma we reap, we will have to become masters of our thinking. We will have to learn to master the thinking process. And first of all, you need to establish for yourself what you want. You have to know what you want. And that expression is often used in regard to personal matters. Am I going on vacation or not? Will I or won't I buy that house? Am I going to do that training or not? But what we mean is much more essential. What are the important things in life? Is that nice car? Is that the fact that you can command respect at work, or that the power you wield? Or is it the spiritual things which are detached from the outer world and relate to the enduring aspects of your consciousness, the aspects that survive death? That is the first choice you have to make. And if you choose the latter, you no longer want to find your happiness in this outer world, which is as illusory and transient as spring blossoms. Then you must try to hold on to focus on the spiritual side of your consciousness. Then you put the spiritual will at work. In Theosophical, it is said that desire is behind the will. And that means that when you desire something very much, you automatically develop the discipline, the will to realize your desire. And this applies as much to selfish desires as to unselfish desires. If you very much want to become a good soccer player or tennis player, you will develop the will not to skip training, to develop or to do your physical exercises, or to watch your food and so on. And if you have a desire to live in the spiritual side of your consciousness, or even better, a desire to be an inspiring source of light and helpfulness to your fellow human beings, you will also develop discipline. and will to accomplish this. The will, and I speak now of the active will, for there is also such a thing as a passive will. The active will is a powerful energy. The active will is the will consciously set in motion by the directing intelligence and innate life. So, if you have the spiritual desire to be a luminous force, a compassionate force in the world, the spiritual will become stronger and stronger. And please note, nothing can stop the compelling energy of the spiritual will. The fact that you cherish the desire to live a spiritual will lead you to increasingly take control over your own life and determine your own destiny. And do you know why there is no force in the world that can suppress the spiritual will? It is because it is rooted in the divine part of your consciousness. It is that part, the inner God, that is omniscient, omnipotent, at least as far as our hierarchy is concerned. On the other hand, it is the egoistic animal desires which unfortunately also often direct the will. In fact, harnessing the will, directing consciousness to either of these two sides of nature, is the origin of what is called good and evil. Evil stems from selfishness, because we thereby create a relative imperfection, a relative disharmony, and goodness arises when we align ourselves with the greater whole. That means when we are selfless, then we create a relative harmony. And when you realize this, you immediately see that evil is not a separate entity anymore than good is a separate entity, a force separate from the rest. No, but that the two are related to each other, and the so-called good is the will directed toward unselfishness, to altruism, while what we call evil is the will directed toward yourself, your self-interest, your greed, and your selfishness. People who have studied the doctrine of karma poorly, or only in part, tend to speak of good and bad karma. But there is no good and bad karma. There's karma, a neutral force. There's always karma. Everything is karma, for everything lives and acts. Karma is the result of actions already done, and karma creates a future through new actions. What we call good and evil stems from our view of life, so that we are either selfish and thus go against the order of nature and cause disharmony, or we are selfless and align with the order of nature. And if we do the latter, we will never face karmic headwinds, because we cooperate with nature, and according to the words of Helena Blavatsky, nature will understand that and make obeisance. We determine our own destiny. If we do not, and go against the order of nature, we reap karmic headwinds, and in our ignorance we then speak of bad luck, of the will of God, or we put the responsibility on others. But there is no moment in our lives, not the smallest incident, that cannot be traced back to ourselves. And if we think we are living in unfortunate circumstances, you cannot blame karma for that, nor that if you are living in happy circumstances, you can praise karma. Karma neither punishes nor rewards. We do that ourselves. Well, as a final conclusion, let us refer again to that universal web of destiny of which every being is a part. Will the realization that we all spring from the same source, we all are a part of that grand living organism, a web within a web, guided by divine beings, existing because of the fact that all work for the whole, that all are there for the whole. Will that realization not fill us with universal love, so that we may be a self-conscious, positive force in that web and inspiring, compassionate force to our fellow human beings? Well, there is again a short break, 3 minutes, and then for the last time this night I will try to answer your question. So, see you in 3 minutes. Welcome back. Well, karma always generates a lot of questions, so there are some questions.
Yes, we have questions. The use of the words my or your karma leaves me somewhat confused. Why then is it said that karma is a law of universal justice?
I understand the question. Well, in fact, nobody can act separated from other beings, because a being always lives in relationships with other beings. So a pure individual karma doesn't exist. Because I act, but I act toward another, and another acts toward me, etc. So in the pure abstract sense, there cannot be individual karma, but also karma is always related to others. But, of course, I have my own responsibility. I have my own way of thinking. I have my own way of reacting on others. So, what I do, I will reap. But I will reap it in accordance with the environment in which I live, which is the reaction I receive from my own actions and my own thinking. So in a way I can say, well, that is my karma because that are the actions I did, but I did it, you know, in cooperation, or at least in kind of relationships with other beings. I mean, just my body is composed of trillions of living beings, all the cells and atoms, etc. So there is no such thing as an isolated human being. If there were an isolated human being, there would be no karma. Because karma is a cause and effect, and effect is always because of the surrounding in which a being lives. And in that way, it's always justice, because you always receive, always reap, yeah, what you have sown. Every thought, every act you may compare with a seed, and the characteristic of the seed, yeah, will be the characteristic of the consequence you reap. But you reap it because of you live in an environment, because of the humans with whom you lived, or you know, the whole hierarchy of which you are a part, the whole web of destiny of which you are a part.
Yeah. And could the law of karma cease to exist if there were universal peace?
Well, you know, we tend to think that karma is something bad. So I spoke, and that is of course a metaphor of headwind, karmic headwind. But what I wanted to express is that if you go against the nature, the consequences you will reap will be to restore the disharmony you created, and that brings suffering, that brings misery. Yeah? So if you are violent, if you hate somebody, if you are selfish, all those things we call evil, né? Of course you get a karmic headwind, you get the consequences of that. But if you live in accordance with the nature, you work on with nature, as Blavatsky says, well, nature will make obedience. That means that you don't get that karmic headwind, but that doesn't mean that there is no karma, yeah, because you act. And if you act, there is karma. So we call it then, in our ignorance, we call it good karma. But good and bad karma doesn't exist. It's just that you cooperate with the harmony of nature, and then you create new harmony and dynamic harmony, because harmony doesn't mean that everything stands still, but harmony in the fact that every human being or every being gives his talents, himself, in fact, and gets from the totality of life what he needs in order to give.
Yeah, so I think this question that just came in, maybe you just answered it, but I'll read it just in case. If even a tree can be recognized by its fruit, why then would there be no good or bad karma?
Because karma is a neutral force. I mean, if a little child puts her hand in the flame of a candle, it hurts. Is that good or bad karma? No, it's neutral karma. You know, if that same flame, that same fire is used to cook your meal, is it good or bad karma? No, it's the same. It's not good or bad karma. It's just the flame, and the characteristic of the flame is that it will heat the things you put in it. And if you put your finger in it, it hurts. And then we call it bad karma. And if we put it, if we use it in order to make our meals, we could. No, it's just a flame. So if I go against the nature and I don't use the nature the way I should use it, and I should use it for the benefit of the whole, yeah, well, then I'm selfish and I will get a reaction. And then we said, yeah, that is bad karma. No, it's not bad karma. It's simply a neutral law.
But then you always have a reaction, but then we just don't recognize it as a reaction as such.
Yeah, because if I will go to home and I will fall on the street, and then I said, yeah, it's bad karma. No, it's not bad karma. It's just the fact that that one reason or another I didn't pay attention or whatever, and I fell. But that is not good or bad karma. It hurts. So there was something in my past, but which created a kind of disharmony in order that I fell at a certain moment.
Yeah, but then you can say to yourself, oh, maybe I should pay more attention, or you blame the people in the street for not making the tiles right,
or something. Yeah. And we, in general, we like to blame others instead of blaming ourselves. Yeah.
So undeserved suffering, if the new personality, one or two lifetimes later, has to face the karma of the old personality, is there such a thing as undeserved suffering? Are you not then an innocent victim?
Well, that's a term that Helena Blavatsky used in the key to Theosophy, but she explained it very well. You know, in fact, everything is karma. There is not such a thing as unmerited karma. But she explained it as follows. If I do something in this life, I do some selfish things, yeah, but the reaction won't come in this life. And then in the next life, I will be confronted with the reactions of the things I did in the past. But I didn't know what I did. So I may call it from the standpoint of one life, I will say it is not because of what I did in this life, and the personality has no knowledge of the former life, and so you may say it's just from the point of the personality, it's not merited karma because he doesn't know what he did wrong. But if you look at on the broader perspective, of course it is karma because he did it in a former life and now he gets the reaction. You know, I gave the example of the lung cancer. If I smoke all my life and won't get sick, maybe because I die in an accident at the age of 40. So the simplest, there's no time for me to get the results of the fact that I'm smoking. I just give an example. And then in the next life I will be born with problems with my lungs. You may say, well, that's a pity, or it's a coincidence. No, it's the fact that I smoked in the previous life. But I don't know I smoked in the previous life. And so I will say, well, I don't, it's not honest. It's not honest because, no, it's honest if you look at it in a broader perspective.
So if somebody is dealing with the consequences of something he did before and is suffering, we should still help them, but you don't want to interfere with that, or how would you say that?
No, that's a very good question, because if I see somebody who is suffering, who has pain or whatever, it's my karma also. Because if it were not my karma, I wouldn't have seen it. So Blavatsky says a very beautiful thing in the Voice of the Silence. I don't know it completely, but it is something like, if you neglect an act of mercy, you will commit a mortal sin. Something like that. More beautiful, without any doubt. But if I see somebody who is suffering and I don't do anything, well, that's not according nature, because we have to help each other. We should be compassionate. And I won't never say, well, that is his or her karma, it has nothing to do with me. I have to go there and try to help. And how do I help? That's another question. Yeah, that doesn't mean that I will substitute her and doing a task or a duty that is not mine, but I, with the knowledge and the wisdom I have, I would give her advice or give him advice or try to do something for her or him. You know, if somebody is sick and he can go to the grocery, you buy the food for them, etc. This all those normal things. So of course, karma doesn't mean that we shouldn't help each other. On the contrary, karma, if you understand karma, you should help and inspire each other. Be compassionate towards all other people with whom you live.
Those were the questions.
Those were the questions. Well, you see, it's very interesting to talk about all those things of karma. And now you ask your questions and I cannot see you, but if you want to have an interaction with all those students, all those people who think about karma, I really can recommend you to participate in the study next week, because next week we are going to study about karma, about your destiny, about this talk. So you have to go to our website and you can fill in your name, etc. Your email, especially your email, because then we can send you the Zoom link, and next Sunday, 7:30, we can discuss with each other on the topic of karma. It's really, really very nice to participate. So I hope to see you next week, next live also, but next week on the Zoom picture. I see you a little picture, but that's very nice anyway. And the next talk is the 7th of January, but I thought there was... Oh yeah, you see that, yeah, you see it already, yeah? The 7th of January, and then we are talking about karma in relationship with peace. Very, very important nowadays. So many wars, and what can we do to using karma to make the world a little bit more peaceful. Well, we end with the Gayatri of the Rig Veda, very, very, very old, and we are not talking to something outside of us, but to our inner God, our inner divinity, the self written in capitals. O thou, golden sun of most excellent splendor, illumine our hearts and fill our minds, so that we, recognizing our oneness with the divinity, which is the heart of the universe, may see the pathway before our feet and tread it to those distant calls of perfection, stimulated by thine own radiant light.